Last week we started figuring out the deadwood. This week we're working on the wormshoe as well as sawmilling.
We have the deadwood that's mostly shaped here, and the deadwood, we talked about this earlier, but it's the piece of timber that fares into the ballast keel. So if we slide it up here, we can see that the nib on the deadwood locks into the nib on the ballast keel, and this will get a bolt put down through it, tying it all together. And at the other end, it'll fade into the beginning of the stem. So you might notice that there's a little bit of a discrepancy here, and this is planned. So this part of the boat is out front and is likely to hit something. So if we were to hit a rock, hit a reef, the deadwood in the front of the ballast keel here is a really likely spot to get smucked. And if it does, we can damage the paint and the anti-fouling, and then that lets these things called shipworms in, and they'll tear the boat apart. They'll just literally destroy it. So what we did is left this gap, and then we're going to fit a wormshoe, which we have right here. We laminated this to match the curve of the deadwood, and this will get fit in on top of the deadwood and then fared into the tip of the stem. And this will get put bedding compound in here, and then we'll put big beefy screws that hold it down. And the idea with that is if we run aground, if we hit something, it's going to damage this outside piece of timber, and if the worms get in there, they're going to be stopped when they hit that layer of anti-fouling paint and that bedding compound. And this part is sacrificial. So just be able to take the screws out, make a new piece, pop it on there, and continue on our merry way, and hopefully contain any of that damage from running aground. So the next step is going to be to cut this closer to its proper width, and then trim these ends so that they fit up really nice and tightly to the ballast keel. Once that's done, I can come down and start working on the fore end of it, which is going to be a little bit trickier. So down here, you can see that the deadwood ends, and right here is the curve that the keel timber gets cut to. And we need to get the top of the wormshoe here to match up nice and neatly with this curve. And when we do that, we're going to cut a little nib here and actually inlay the very tip of the wormshoe into the keel timber. So here is the line for what we're going to cut out of the keel timber. It's just a little rebate, and then we're going to trim out the same piece here on the wormshoe, and this end of the wormshoe will flop in there and get screwed down really well. And as you can see, we're going to have a 1-inch thick end, so that'll be a lot stronger. It'll be a lot less likely to check and split and crack. And if we ever hit something, it's more likely that it's going to hit and bounce over and tear up the wormshoe and not rip the wormshoe off. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. I can't have it moving around on me. Cool. Alright, I think that looks good. This is one of those instances without scrap, it's crap. Now I'll do some line transfers. I'm gonna clamp this, flip this over, clamp it again, and I gotta mark and just remove this little triangle. And then we'll do a little bit of a test foot, see if everything looks like it's gonna line up, and we'll have to pony up and cut the keel timber, which it's always nerve-wracking cutting the keel timber. Well, should we see how that looks? You can grab that and bring it over if you want. Flop it right up there.
Orientation?
The sun up and that way.
Okay. Right there?
Yep. This should meet right up. So, in theory, if I notch this out, this should sit down into it. And then by the time I do the last bit of trimming on this nib end, it should lock in there perfectly. So I think the next step is to pony up and cut the keel timber. So whenever I'm kerfing on an angled cut, I always kerf to the deeper side of the line.
Okay.
So that if anything, I'm pretty much guaranteed to end up shallower than deeper. Shallower is easier to fix than going too deep. So the last step to do is to bring it down to its final shape. So I have some lines marked on the top here on the Wormshoe, and this is going to end up being the width of the Wormshoe, and then we're going to have a little bit of a taper that kind of matches the ballast keel, and then we have to remove from this line basically out to this edge. So what I'm going to do is take the handsaw here, because it's really not much wood to remove, and I'm just going to cut some kerfs so that I hit this line and the outer edge of the timber. I'll come through with the chisel, the axe, the adze, the power plane, whack all that off, and we'll smooth it out. Once that's done, we'll flip it over, do the other side, put it on for a test fit, and I think it'll almost be about ready to paint and move on. So super exciting. It's another boat piece almost finished. So the last little bit to do is to just kind of shave off this corner where the top of the Wormshoe meets the ballast keel. And we got two knots that just need a little attention. They're kind of punkier than I would like. So one is so small, I'm just gonna drill it out with a drill bit and take a piece of oak over to the lathe and turn a little dowel to fit and glue that in. It'll be easy peasy. This one is a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna have to take the Wormshoe off, bring it over to the bench, and we'll just cut out a little rectangular chunk there, get rid of that split soft knot, and put in a little harder piece of wood, glue that in place, and then the Fore deadwood will be ready for paint.
The graving pieces were installed a bit later when we went to the wooden boat show at Mystic Seaport this year. But for right now, let's transition to something a little bit different. You must have noticed earlier that we had a couple extra hands helping us.
We got a little extra help today, actually for this weekend. Rhys flew from all the way from
Cork and Ireland.
Cork and Ireland. So far he has the longest travel distance to come help on Arabella. We'll see if someone can beat him down the road.
First foreign supporter, right?
Yeah, well, first one to come, yeah.
Yeah.
So Alix and I are gonna work on the Fore deadwood and finish that up, and we're gonna cut Rhys loose on getting these big timbers ready for the aft deadwood.
Rhys has his own sailing channel and is restoring a steel boat back in Ireland and wanted to learn a little bit more about the process of working with wood. So we set him up with that. Michael also came to help and actually drove all the way from Ohio to be here for the week. He's also been getting into woodworking and took a liking to Steve's mallet. So we set him up on the lathe to make his own before they both tackled routing a flat face onto the largest lamination for the aft timber. All of this was while we waited for the sawmill to come. If you remember correctly, we had borrowed a small sawmill from a friend and that one was not strong enough, so we ended up calling in the big guns. Alright, let's see this thing in action. We started out by milling a load of stickers. These are pieces of wood that you place between the boards as they are stacked to allow them to breathe and for the airflow to go between them and dry them evenly. With those milled, it's time to get to the fun stuff. Everything on this behemoth is automated from the control panel. The loading arm, log roller, hydraulic dogs to move and pin the log, and finally, the carriage, which has adjustable guides as well as a debarker that follows in front of the blade to remove bark, mud, and dirt to keep the blades sharper for longer. This thing was fun to watch in action. Thanks to James, we milled over 10,000 board feet of lumber in 2 days. Now, how did this motley crew accomplish this? First, we set up a large, relatively level cribbed area, so that as soon as the lumber came off the mill and onto the trailer, we drove it over with the tractor, and then with a system of ropes and blocks, we used the truck to quickly pull the whole load into a pile and be ready for the next load coming off the sawmill. Bypassing stacking the lumber now allowed us to move much quicker and save time and therefore money on the mill rental. We'd later take the time to sort and stack it properly. So, what did we mill? All of our black locust was flitch cut to 4 inches thick. This is going to give us our dead eyes, the Samson post, and other high wear parts of the boat. One thing we hadn't prepared for well enough in the last milling was having enough dimensional lumber for construction projects throughout the build. This time we took down a bunch of pines as well as the large hemlock, and these were all cut into 4x4s, 2x4s, and 2x8s. Finally, all of our oaks were flitch cut as well, so we have some big, beautiful slabs to work with. Whether it be for ribs or for floor timbers, we'll be able to resaw them into whatever we need at this point.
We got some bruiser oak slabs here. So beautiful.
And don't worry, nothing here is going to waste. All the slash produced here is going to be firewood to heat us through the next couple winters, as well as to fuel the steam box once we get to steam bending in the ribs. Another huge help was having access to our friend Tom's brand new Volvo skid steer with grapple rake attachment. Steve used it to load logs directly onto the loading arm of the mill, and later to bring lumber to the staging when the truck starter died on us. Well, it's always something. We've been using the truck to pull the lumber up onto the cribbing, and the starter just died. So we're gonna have to tow the truck out of here and find something else to do.
That's it, Rhys.
As I mentioned earlier, we did the milling in 2 grueling days, the first of which was hot and may have wrecked our helpers.
How you doing, Rhys?
Absolutely fine. I'm not overheating at all.
Oh, you don't look like it.
My head tomato.
No, I actually don't look bad.
How about you, Michael?
Definitely not getting an honest day's work.
Right? Good day.
Yeah.
The second day was put off for later that week due to rain. So Michael and Rhys had already headed home by then, and I was down with a crushed foot, don't ask, and video editing. So Steve and James amazingly milled the rest of that pile by themselves. Needless to say, we ended up with a lot of beautiful wood. It all does need to be stacked though, so let's save that for the next installment, along with the aft deadwood. Also, don't forget to check out Rhys's channel. It's linked in the description below.
So, thankfully, James came here and bailed us out. So the other mill we had just was not up to snuff, and it was gonna take us 3 weeks, 3 months, I don't know. So we called James from the J team. He was kind enough to come out on really short notice and give us a day rate since everything was flitched. So he gave us like a killer deal, really helped us out. So we want to give James a little bit of a shameless plug here. So if you are local and you need some work done, it's a good guy to call. So who are you, James? What do you guys do? What's your story?
Yeah, so I'm James Clark, and we've had a portable sawmill, my brother and I, for the past 10 years. So we go around wherever you got logs, we cut what you want. This thing will cut up to 20 foot long, probably a 40-inch diameter. I can cut 30-inch wide boards. And then our chainsaw mill is up to 79 inches wide in any length.
So basically, if you have a tree, these guys can cut it.
Yep, as long as it's on the ground. So we're out of South Deerfield. We'll travel as far as you want. This was a short drive, so it's easy. But I'm going out to Rhode Island Friday, and I'll travel however far you want me to. And to reach me, it's jteamsawmill.com, or you can call me 413-522-2579, and we'll figure out what we can do for you.
Sweet. Well, thank you, James, so much. We really
no
appreciate
problem.
it. It's a pleasure working with you.
This is a lot of fun. Yeah, Steve knows what he's doing with that skid steer. Yeah.